Here on the Half Price Concessions podcast, and we are talking Franklin County Speedway and my good buddy, my former employer, Mr. Kenny Lang, meeting us in Rocky Mount to knock this out today. Kenny, first and foremost, appreciate you coming down to meet me. It's a warm day out today when we're recording this, so it almost feels like racing weather, especially since it's raining. You could tell it probably would be racing season.
It sure is.
With the rain.
Thanks for having me, Tyler. I appreciate it.
Well, I got to thank you off the top, because without you, I would have no exposure to Franklin County Speedway. When you kind of came to me in 2010 and let me announce a couple races when you were trying to put some events on at the track, that was my first exposure. As a kid, I had never heard of Franklin County Speedway, had no idea it existed, probably still wouldn't honestly have ever gone anything there if it wasn't for you. So I have to thank you for that, first and foremost. You're the reason I even have this idea.
Yeah, well, I've been around Franklin County for as long as I can remember. 1971, I was 2 years old, and that's when my mom and dad started dragging me with them, and everything kind of snowballed from there. I've been a fan ever since.
So you started going when you was 2. Do you remember? You probably don't remember when you was 2, but like what was like that early age you first remember some of the drivers and stuff that you were seeing at Franklin County?
I'd probably say around 6 or 7 years old, mid 70s. I can remember as a kid, the Sam Ards, Jimmy Hensley's. These were not vivid memories, but just things that stand out, over time. They used to have the race car rides with the kids, and I can remember riding in Johnny Bryant's Gremlin, Paul Radford's Pinto. So that was probably my first memories of being at that racetrack. I
remember Jimmy Hensley. That name popped up to me on a 1993 NASCAR year in review, where he brought out the first caution at the Daytona 500. I did not realize he came from Franklin County Speedway.
Well, yeah, that was actually Jimmy started really young. I mean, he was probably in his early 20s, late teens, and he actually ran at Starkey Motor Speedway, which was in Roanoke County. This is, it closed down before Franklin County even opened, I believe. So, but yeah, he had a lot of success at Franklin County in his late model sportsman years.
So, for people like me who maybe don't know a darn thing about Franklin County or just have a few years exposure, about how old is the place as far as racing goes?
I think it was dirt for the first year or so, I believe. I'm kind of foggy on those memories from reading about it. They paved it in 1969. I think it was about a half season, full-time season in 1970, and it's been in operation every year since. So 51st year this year, probably 52nd. So
wow, yeah. That's pretty good.
Same asphalt, has never been paved. I think it has had some patchwork done, but
it had to have had some patchwork done.
Yeah, but it has never been paved. And you talk to drivers who have raced there, recently, and they say it's still got quite a bit of grip to be a 50-year-old surface.
It's pretty amazing, because you go to a lot of these other tracks that are as old as far as the surface goes. I mean, they're just worn to smithereens, and there ain't no grip.
Yeah.
Like I think of Bowman Gray, where it's like you better put something special on your tires. You ain't gonna get no grip otherwise.
Yeah. And I think the banking at Franklin County kind of helps that out too, because it is 22 degrees in the corners. So you go in the corners and the car's gonna hold you. So I think that that helps out. But it is some old pavement. It's hard to believe it's been there as long as it has.
One of the things that I try to tell people about if they're going to Franklin County for the first time is I always try to tell them, unless you got the race car, you're bringing the race car with you, if it's just you and your passenger car, like take the back roads, because as you get closer to the track, for an outsider like me, it feels like you go back in time. Like it does not look like there's been a whole lot of change just in the area going up to the track, and then you get to the track and it still looks like something out of 1970s.
Yeah,
like it's not a lot of modern amenities and stuff, but that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's well off the beaten path, and I think that's one thing that might hurt the racetrack nowadays is it's so far off the beaten path. And like you said, it's not modernized. it's hard to get big haulers, you know, in the pits because, you know, it was modeled in 1970. So, you know, we're 50 years down the road. But, yeah, it's beautiful country. Actually, a little off-racing topic, there was a dairy farm that's not far from the racetrack that had been in business for as long as I was going over there, and it had just went out of business here lately. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's
So I see all these things. You are one of the people on this Franklin County Speedway Memories page that I think you or someone invited me to on Facebook, and I just get to looking at it, and I see these old pictures, and while some of the things around the track have changed, like there's less trees, like I remember some of those pictures where there's a tree in the infield, which to me seems crazy at a racetrack, but while the surface has kind of stayed the same, some of the stuff around the outside has been tidied up, but the thing that I notice in all these old pictures is the insane fan turnout. I mean, the crowd turnout for a track that is, I mean, it really is kind of in the middle of nowhere, and it was able to just draw these humongous crowds. Like, do you remember crowds that size when you were going as a kid?
Oh yeah, 70s not so much, but when I became a teenager in the 80s, I can remember Saturday nights where, you know, we would get there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon just because we wanted to beat the traffic. We always wanted our, you know, the seats we wanted, and yeah, I can remember crowds, overflow crowds. Probably the biggest crowd that I ever seen was the night that Rick Mast was going for a $25,000 bonus that promoter Whitey Taylor had put up if you won 3 consecutive 100-lap late model sportsman races. And actually on the Franklin County Memories page, I think there's a picture from the Roanoke Times, an aerial shot showing the cars lined up. And, you know, a lot of folks that may not have been at Franklin County, you got to go up a pretty long hill from the main road to get into the racetrack, and it was lined up down that hill and down the road running into the racetrack. So
wow,
yeah.
Was Rick kind of had he gotten to NASCAR yet, or was this still him kind of building up?
He was running late model sportsman series, and that's a funny story. I think they were headed to Hickory, which he's from Rockbridge, Bass, Virginia. So they were headed to Hickory, and I think they blew a power steering unit or belt or something on their tow truck, and instead of, you know, not racing that night, they decided to come to Franklin County.
Okay.
And that was that was the first 100-lap race of this deal that Whitey had to pay this money, and he came in and won it.
Wow.
And that kind of, you know, got the ball rolling for probably the biggest summer crowd-wise Franklin County Speedway's history.
Did you have like a specific spot you like to sit? It seems like everybody at these tracks, even me as a kid going to Ace, like I went to Ace like you went to Franklin County, I always remember we always sat in that same spot. Mm-hmm. And even now as an adult, if I just go stand there, it's like I could just sit there and like daydream and remember and stuff. Did you have that spot?
Yeah, and you know it kind of changed throughout the years. When I first started going when I was a baby, my brother, I've got an 8-year-old brother he's as crazy about Franklin County as I am. We used to have a 65 Country Square station wagon that, you know, back then they ran on Friday nights, and Mike always tells the story that, you know, they would have the station wagon packed and ready to go to the racetrack when my dad got off of work. They wouldn't even let him take a shower as soon as he got there, and they would park on the backside, which back in that day, you could back your vehicle right up to the top of the grandstands.
Really?
And just sit there. It's kind of like trackside parking in a lot of places nowadays, but back then you could do that. And it started off on the backside. In the 80s, we kind of graduated over to the front side, and I don't know the reason. You know, I still wasn't able to drive, but that's where Dad liked to park, and that was another. You know, we were still under you could back your vehicle right up to the top of the stands, and Dad had a, you know, Chevrolet pickup truck, and he was sitting in the bed of the pickup truck and watching racing. But yeah, that's the way I am now. At any racetrack I frequent, I usually sit in the same spot.
Wow, that is. You know what? I'm glad y'all were responsible, because I could see some person today, if they allowed that nowadays at Franklin County, someone being a few too many Pepsis in and backing up too far and backing their car down, because you go down much further and you're on the racetrack.
Yeah. I mean, and back in those days, on the front side days, they would it would double park. You'd have cars backed up to the grandstand, and then you'd have a car in front of you.
Yeah.
And it was, if you had to get out of there, if you wanted to go home early, you never could go because, everybody would stay and watch the races. So, yeah, it's crazy how far things have come as far as that is concerned.
How much was it to get in back then? You remember, like $5? Yeah,
$5.
Man, you never see that again.
No, not unless somebody feels generous. But the place. I mean, it just holds so many memories. We were talking about the Franklin County Speedway Memory Facebook page, and we've had so many great photographers from the day that have donated their pictures and let us use them. And I mean, we've got pictures from the very opening day up to 2010, which that's the limit on the page is 2010. We don't want anything newer, but just great stuff.
So nowadays, especially when you go to like dirt tracks and stuff, there's like 10 different divisions. Asphalt, there seems to be a variation on what they run and stuff. Nobody seems to have the same rules on 4 cylinders, and modifieds are different at tracks and stuff. But like when you were a kid going to Franklin County, if you're sitting there watching, what were like kind of the typical classes that you would see like on a weekly basis, other than the late model sportsmen's or whatever the premier division was?
There was 3 divisions back when those first vivid memories when I was 6, 7, or 8. It was a late model sportsmen's, modifieds, and hobby division. Which hobby division back then was mostly like a 6-cylinder, 6-cylinder division. So
okay.
But then in the 80s. You had late models, you had limited sportsmen, which were 6 cylinders in the 80s. Then you might have had a mini stock, a 4-cylinder, and you would have like what they called a family division, which was more like an enduro car nowadays.
Okay, something big and heavy.
Yes, yeah. Torinos, Dodge Chargers, bigger cars like that.
Okay. Did you ever get the itch to get out there?
Never have had the itch to drive a race car. As much as a fan as I've been in all these years, I've never wanted to set my rear end in one. Now I have dabbled in the iRacing stuff a little bit, which that's fun, but never have. I just have always been a big fan of the sport, but never have had the itch to drive.
Okay. Who was your favorite like late model sportsman driver, as as a kid, or did you have one? Did you just watching the racing?
Paul Radford was far and beyond my childhood hero. He could just do things with a race car back when I was a kid that were just unbelievable. I mean, he could get in cars that weren't competitive with other drivers and just drive the wheels off of them.
Yeah.
So I mean, he was my favorite when I was a kid.
Gotcha. We were talking a little bit before I hit the record button about Barry Beggerly, because I had him on a previous episode, and I remember when I went in 2010. I know Barry was kind of coming out of retirement, and I know you were promoting some races there, and you guys were trying to get him back up there, because I did not know he had won a championship up there. Do you remember watching him race there?
Yeah. That was the real formative years for me was a teenager. That's when it really hooked me good. 1982, I was 13 or 14, and Barry won the championship, black and silver. Pontiac Ventura with a red number 10, Southern Pride car wash, just a vivid memory.
Yeah.
I think he won 14 races that year.
Oh, wow.
And he was just dominant. I mean, he had good competition with Gerald Compton and Bobby Radford and guys like that, but Barry was just almost untouchable that season.
That's crazy. See, I only think of Barry as ace in Orange County just because that's where I grew up and the little bit of time at South Boston, but that's really cool to hear about.
Yeah, he was awesome, man. I mean, he was a wheelman. Well, I mean, he was still a wheelman in the '60s at Ace. So
yeah, he could be a wheelman in a
baby
carriage.
That's right. That's exactly right. I agree.
One of the things I see on the memories page that intrigues me is when you guys post like the programs and stuff. And I remember the ones where there would be like these invitational races, and some of the names like I think Darrell Waltrip and Tim Richmond pop up. What do you kind of know about those things? Because I have no knowledge of any of that. So fill me in on some of that.
As a promoter, Whitey would try to get the Cup guys to come on like a Martinsville weekend sometimes, or he would have them come when they'd have the the invitational races to Charlotte. So back in those days, if you won a late model sportsman race at a local short track that was an invitational to the Charlotte Busch Grand National race or late model sportsman race, whatever it was in the day, you would get bonus money if you made the field at Charlotte if you won that race at the short track that night.
Okay.
So sometimes it would coincide that he would bring the Cup guys in, on those nights, and that was hey, I'll give you $5,000. Daryl, you bring your late model sportsman car and come race against our guys.
Oh.
So back in the day, it was Daryl and Bobby Allison one night. They had Harry Gant and Darrell Walter one night. They had Tim Richmond come too. So they would compete against the local guys, and it was a good time, and big crowds would come out for that also.
It kind of sounds like a little bit of like what the Denny Hamlin short track showdown was in some of those early years at Southside, and then at South Boston and stuff, where you get the local guy, you're giving the local guys some kind of chance to run their cars, their style of cars against the guys that run for money.
Yeah, and one of the best memories on one of those nights was big field of cars. Probably, Franklin County, they call it a 3/8 mile, but it's more of a third.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think 3/8 is being a little liberal about it.
If it's measured by NASCAR standards today, it's probably a third, kind of more like a Southside Speedway. But, back in that day, 20 cars was a real good field. And Harry Gant was scheduled to race that night, which, back in those I think this was 1985, he didn't own his own, Busch cars or late model sportsman cars, so he comes in and drives a Jack Ingram prepared Skull Bandit Grand Am.
Oh, there's a name right there.
Yeah, and if you look at some of the pictures on that Franklin County Memories page, the doors have 33 on it, but the roof of it has a number 11 on it. And Jack was actually, and see, in my memories, of young, I never remember Jack racing a late model sportsman car in the 70s, but later come to find out, I seen some pictures where he did. And actually, he did shake that car down in 1985 for Harry before he got to the racetrack. And Harry just absolutely dominated him in a 200-lapper that night.
Yeah.
He started fourth and probably got the lead around lap 30, and nobody had anything for him. So
just walked the dog.
Yeah.
Man, that's something. So at this time, I know there's Franklin County going, South Boston, was New River Valley Speedway, what we call Motor Mile now, going?
Well, in its heyday, the heyday most people talk about for Franklin County is the 80s.
Yeah.
I'm more of a 70s guy, but I was there during the 80s too. Motor Mile was built as Pulaski County Speedway. It opened in 1988. It started putting a dent in Franklin County Speedway's cars.
Yeah.
Taking their cars away, taking their competitors. And I think that was probably because of the NASCAR sanctioning, because back in the 80s, the NASCAR sanction was really a big thing, especially late 80s,
yeah.
Or mid to late 80s. So 1988 was when Pulaski opened, and it was, I thought they were going to work together, Franklin County and Pulaski. They're in a straight line. They're probably 35 miles apart,
yeah.
But it just never did work.
Wow.
Yeah.
So South Boston's, they didn't really have much effect on Franklin County's car counts.
No, but we did get cars from South Boston that would come race at Franklin County quite a bit back in the day. But, and that's, as a race fan, that's one thing I kicked myself for in the 80s was I never made it to South Boston when it was 3/8 of a mile.
Yeah.
I thought I was a teenager, I thought Franklin County was the end-all, be-all racetrack. And back then, there was good car counts, there was good racing. Why would I drive why would I drive past Franklin County to go to South Boston? But now, looking back and seeing all the, the late model sportsman series races that South Boston had in the 80s that I missed, it kind of kicked myself. But, in the 80s, Franklin County Speedway had good racing in just about every division. So
yeah. I know one of the names that comes up a ton, has already come up a ton, is Whitey Taylor, the guy who still owns the track. I'm purely ignorant on this. Is he the only person that's ever owned the track? Was there other people before him that owned it?
No, Wilton Agee was the first owner. He built the place, and he ran the racetrack, I think, through 1976. And then you'll know this name, Michael McGuire's grandfather, Bill Squeak McGuire, leased it and ran it in 77 and 78.
Okay.
And he had, oh man, he had good racing. I mean, he paid show money. Back in the day, you paid show money to these late model sportsman guys. Dave Marcus, Morgan Shepherd.
Oh, wow.
All those guys would come race. He would have, top-notch talent. And in 1979, I think it's the year that Whitey started running, that he leased it from Wilton, and I think he bought it maybe in 81, and he's owned it ever since.
Oh, okay. So it's only been 3 sets of owners.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, yeah, 2 owners.
Maybe one leasee mixed in there.
And then, as we got further along in 2007 and 2008, Richard Gluth leased it and had it for 2 years under an ASA sanction.
Yeah, because that's when I saw those pictures of Rodney Cook and Jimmy Mullins racing.
Yeah. And see, I really appreciate Richard Gluth because he gave me a chance to get on the public relations side of racing.
Yeah.
So I did all the public relations and stuff like that for the racetrack in 2007 and 2008. He took me to Daytona to the workshop that they have every February for the
with Dennis
track
Huth
owners
and all those guys from
Dennis
ASA.
Huth, and all them guys. But that was fun times. I mean, Richard had a good thing going. I wish that he could have kept going with what he had going, but he was also a contractor, a housing contractor, and 2008 is kind of when the bottom fell out for all that stuff. So I think it hurt his chances to keep going at Franklin County. But that was fun times. I mean, the PR side gave me a whole different perspective on short track racing, and that's kind of what led to me and Joey Mills taking a shot at promotion. We promoted 3 races. The first race we promoted was in 2009, and it was actually a co-promotion with Randy Myers.
Okay.
Randy did the modified race that day, and we did the late model stock car race. So we were responsible for the purse and everything for the late model race. We had 10 cars show up that day, but we paid them handsomely, and that kind of gave us the idea to do what we did in 2010 when you came and helped us for our 2 races.
Yeah. Now those were, that was some of the best racing I'd ever seen. It was so, because I was I think a little bit like you. As a kid, I was so Ace Speedway centered that I did not feel the need to venture outside much. I'd go to like 311 to a dirt race or Orange County once in a while, but I was just like, Ace was the place. Mm-hmm. That's where I grew up. So in 2010, when I come to Franklin County, and it was funny, I'll tell you a funny story. So that was my first year announcing. My dad and my grandparents and my sister and maybe my stepmom went, they all come up to hear me announce. And I gave them the address, and they were getting about halfway up. I think they got lost. My dad got a speeding ticket.
Oh, man.
But they get there, and I think we had a little dip in the action where I could go say hey to them. And my grandma was like, man, we went back in time? Mm-hmm. I said, yeah. And then my dad was like, yeah, but he was having fun watching practice because they're just going so fast. So let me ask you this. You got kind of going involved in that in 2009, a little bit before that when the other guy was leasing the track and putting stuff on. Before that, kind of leading into that, had the participation in racing dropped off to a point where it was going to take someone other than Whitey to kind of get people back in the tent? What kind of was leading into that?
Yeah, it was a sad time for the Speedway. I think from 2000 to when Richard took the racetrack in 2007. I mean, when Richard leased the place, he did improvements to the towers and all. They were in pretty rough shape, and widened the pit gate because like you said, back in time, the pit gate at Franklin County up until 2007 was probably wide enough to barely get a pickup truck and a trailer through. And then, in the mid 2000s, you got guys with enclosed trailers and bigger vehicles pulling them, and so he did make that change and widen that pit entrance. But yeah, they were on hard times before Richard kind of got in there and did what he did.
The participation had just gone away, and some other things probably.
Yeah.
Rodney Cook told me a few stories.
Yeah, it was just it was not good, and I don't know why he might have been burnt out. I mean, as long as he had promoted it, takes a lot of energy. I mean, just to do those 2 races that Joey and I tackled with left turn promotions. I mean, we were at it all day, every day, trying to line up sponsorship and people to come work the racetrack and officials. And, I always said before, man, I'd love, I could do that. It's a lot. And, from, helping Brad at Ace, and it's a lot of stuff that goes on to try to put on one of those shows.
Stuff that you never saw as a fan.
Yes, a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So in 2010, I remember going there working. I think you guys maybe did 4 or 5 divisions of racing. Mm-hmm. I remember Rodney Cook and Jimmy Mullins and Michael McGuire, and I don't know if it was the first race or the second race, where those 3 were just bearing down on each other, nose to tail, for like the last 10 laps. And it's some of the best racing I've ever seen in my life. It was one of the few times in life, in my racing, where I remember going down to interview them all. And the guys that didn't win, the guys that weren't named Rodney Cook, they were a little disappointed, but you could just tell they just had a dang ball. Yeah. And that was special. 'Cause I think the second race was a night race. I feel like the first one was ran during the day.
Yeah, it was. The first one we ran on a Sunday afternoon. I know we actually ran it on Memorial Day, I believe it was, and it was an afternoon race. And then the second one was in August, and that was the one that had. I mean, you had Mike Looney.
Yeah.
He sat on the pole that night and led.
Not that he ever went on to do anything.
he led quite a bit of the race and overheated, and you had Rodney, you had Jimmy, you had the late Buster Carroll.
Yeah, that 45 car.
Yeah, you had Michael McGuire, young upcoming kid at that time. So much family history at that place.
Yeah.
His dad, Tim, won the championship in 1985, I believe, in late model sportsman. His uncle Tony, multiple, Martinsville winner, could get around Franklin County Speedway. We had good field in that. We had great fields in our mini stocks. Doodle Lang would come support us, and he's no relation to myself, but.
Are you sure? Or are you just denying that?
I'm sure. But Doodle's one of the best I've ever seen get around Franklin County Speedway in a Mod 4 mini stock car.
Yeah.
I mean, he the last little bit, he's got, 3 or 4 championships at Motor Mile, but he's better at Franklin County than he is at Motor Mile.
Yeah, he was. I don't think he made it a bore fest, but I remember he just got out front and he was just gone in the 2 races I saw there. And my dad had to remind me about Mike Looney being at those races, because now I remember back, and Mike, he had motor trouble like both times. Like I remember him being fast in practice and qualifying, and something would always go wrong. And I was talking to my dad about Rodney and Jimmy and McGuire, and he was like, "Well, you forgot, daggum, Looney was there," and I was like, "Oh yeah." Like, boy, if you could have got them, if Looney hadn't had engine trouble, boy,
and
it'd have been even better.
And Mike, I mean, he's a Franklin County bred race car driver. He started in the mid-'90s in the pure stock division at Franklin County, and I'd say 9 out of the 10 drivers that I talk to will tell you that Franklin County Speedway is probably one of their favorite tracks to drive. It's just something that they say, if you can race well at Franklin County, you can race well anywhere.
Man, that's good stuff. Yeah. I always remember another thing that was unique and scared me at the same time. When I came in 2010, you had Danny Willard come in as the flagman, he's one of the race directors for Cars Tour, was with UAR for a long time now. His son is the best in the business in flagging. And I remember being in the tower Mackie McBroom was upstairs race directing.
Late Mackie McBroom.
Yep, rest his soul.
Yes, sir.
I'm on my level of the tower, and I look out and I see Danny, and I'm like, oh my God, Danny is completely exposed in this flag stand. It is unique, and I liked how close he was, but I was also scared about how close he was. That flag stand you don't see that kind of flag stand at other tracks today.
Like we talked earlier, 1970, that's when it was built, and it hadn't been changed. I mean, and actually Brandon, Danny, two of the finest people I've ever met. Danny would do anything for us at Franklin County, and he still helping Langley Austin out at his shows that he promotes over there today. And Brandon flagged the November race over there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean it's just a little cage set in concrete, in a concrete slab, and they come whizzing by you. I mean, you could actually probably touch the roofs of the cars with the flag when you do your flag and stuff. So.
Yeah, I'm about to say I think there was one great shot somebody got. I don't know if it's on the page or not, but I remember seeing it somewhere where I think Danny was in the flag stand and he's having to kind of push himself back because there's a wreck happening right at him. So just one of those things. Another unique piece of Franklin County.
Oh yeah, and I always talk that trash. Me and my dad, and my brother, we still go racing all the time. We'll go to South Boston and Southern National and places like that to watch. And every time we get in the car going down the road to a racetrack, we talk about what we do to Franklin County Speedway if we ever hit the lottery and bought the place.
Yeah.
So that's flag stand would be one of the first fixes. I think.
Get him a little bit away from
That's
the
right.
cars. So. You do the one race in 09, which I think, was that the one Darrell Wallace Jr.
Yes.
One? The 13-year-old Darrell Wallace Jr. And Rodney Cook was driving, I think, Travis Sharp's 34 car.
Yes, sir.
He was
That's
not
correct.
in his usual 14.
Yeah.
2010, I remember Rodney wins both races. And after that, was there a time when you were trying to see if you could do a season-long lease? Do I remember that correctly?
Well, what we wanted to do is after our August race in 2010, we wanted to end up the season with a limited sportsman, kind of big race for those guys instead of going the late model stock route because, we wanted to do that. And, we got a different class as our main feature. We wanted a little break on the lease from Whitey, and we just never could work it out.
Yeah.
And then, we had talked about maybe trying to do something for the 2011 season, but it didn't work out with Whitey.
Was the gap, you don't have to tell me the specific numbers, but was the gap pretty substantial, or was it small enough where it was really frustrating?
It was small enough where it was really frustrating, but,
Yeah.
And, I think we treated Whitey very good on what we did for our two races in 2010. He made money. We didn't lose money. And, we paid the drivers what we told them we was going to pay. And sometimes it was a little extra, I think, in some folks. But it's just one of those things. We couldn't come to an agreement. And I kind of hate it. But
was that pretty frustrating, or did you kind of just accept it?
Well, I kind of accepted it, because I was still working. Now that I'm retired, if anybody that listens to this podcast wants to lease the place, I'm free to be a general manager if you need it. But I mean, I was, and like I told you earlier, when we were talking, it's a full-time gig. If you're going to promote a racetrack, you got to hustle.
Yeah.
And folks just don't see that. They think you can. Say I'm going to have the race and put out how many laps you're going to run for the division and the purse and then go. Well, it's
a lot harder than that.
It's a lot more to it.
I mean, I remember you in 2010. I remember Rodney's car at Ace having left-turn promotions on the hood, and you were coming to Ace on Fridays. I'm sure you were going to other tracks too, not in an effort to steal drivers, but just to try to get out there and have a rapport so that when you put this event out, you had a little bit of credibility with him. Like, hey, this guy's a straight-up guy. He's not a con man. He's just trying to put on a race at a racetrack that he likes.
Yeah, and that's that's what we did. We tried to, because me and Joey both, and Joey Mills worked just as hard as I did on anything that we did in those races. I mean, he hustled just like I did. And he was a fan of the place when he was a kid. We just wanted to see good racing back at our home track. Yeah. We seen what it could be with Richard Gluth and what he had going on for those 2 seasons, and we didn't want to see it all go down the drain again. And you know, it was a labor of love, because, you know, I'm still tickled to death at you know, the participation we got in the folks. I mean, Rodney Cook was the first one that said, "Yeah, you put it on and I'll be there."
Yeah. That
was before, you know, we did any sponsorship on his car, which our races helped us do that for him. So, yeah. And that's one of my best memories in racing as a fan, was being on the hood of Rodney's car when he won the big fall race at Ace. That, you know, that was a crazy,
too bad the hood was off the car because he got in a wreck.
That was a crazy race, but yeah, that was a good memory. So I
think you'd be hard pressed to not find somebody with a good memory or 5 with Rodney Cook.
That's exactly right.
About everybody does. So 2010 happens. You guys are unable to work out a deal with Whitey. Then there's that period of time, I don't remember what year it was, when they brought in the cameras and the reality show that ended up on YouTube, and it gets lamented by plenty of people with common sense. Sometimes it pops up on Twitter, but that seems like it was a pretty dark time for the Speedway.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it was a kind of a lightning in the bottle thing for Whitey. He wanted to capitalize on what they had going on, and I won't even mention the phrase.
Yeah, you don't have to do that.
I got a couple guys that post it sometimes on Facebook, and I tell them it's $100 fine for mentioning that phrase. So it's kind of a running joke between me and Wesley Thomason and some other guys. But yeah, I mean, and I think a lot of that was ignited by the Bowman Gray TV series.
Yeah, it just been on History Channel.
He kind of seen that, and he kind of tried to capitalize, but it wasn't good.
Did more harm than good.
Yes.
So you get there, they come through that. Then there's the period where Langley Austin comes in from race 22, and he starts putting on races there. What was that kind of like for you as a fan when he came in? Were you able to go to a lot of those shows and watch, or
didn't miss one? I don't believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because Langley's another guy that has an insatiable love for Franklin County Speedway. All he wants to do is see fans in the stands and good racing. Of course, he's a businessman too. I mean, he's in it for the business part, but you know, deep down, he wants to see the racetrack succeed.
Yeah.
So he had a good thing rolling a couple times, and it kind of fizzled out, and you know, one thing led to another, and I think now I don't know what he's got planned for most of this year, but I do know he's got another race scheduled for March 14th and 15th of this year, and you know, I'll be there to support him. It's 20 minutes from my house, you know.
Yeah.
And I just like to see good racing at the old place.
How heartbreaking was it as a fan? Because I remember there's that night, there's like 5 articles written on it when Langley and his team were doing the Moonshine Capital promotions, and they were doing a season-long thing, and it looked like the place was picking up some steam. And then there's that night where Whitey comes in and talks, you know, talking about digging up the infield to do a mud bog or something like that, and Langley's going around, from what the article said, shaking people's hands, and it was kind of going to be, they were kind of getting broken off halfway through what they were trying to do. How heartbreaking was that for you as a fan to see the good that was coming and then all went down the drain?
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, like you said, you know, like we were saying, Langley and Kim, they put their heart and soul into, you know, building that thing up, and it was, you know, you got to lay your foundation and then build on top of it, and that's what they were doing. They were coming along pretty good, and then just, you know, I don't know the particulars of their deal, of how things went down, but it was tough.
Yeah.
I mean, people love that place. I mean, and you know, when it's going good, you can get good crowds in there, and it's like Ace and it's like South Boston. At Franklin County, you sit right on top of the competition.
Yeah, you were not far away at all.
Yeah, and that's a good thing about, you know, racetracks like that, and that's probably one of the drawbacks I have for Motor Mile. I love Motor Miles. NASCAR sanctioning, their professionalism, but when they built the place, the grandstands are just, they're too far away from the racetrack. I mean, and you know, that's no fault. I mean, they were doing what they thought was great. It's an immaculate facility. Don't get me wrong.
It gets full when the monster trucks are there.
Yeah, yeah. But
as far as racing, it does seem like you're really far away.
Yeah, and you know, I was, not to get off subject. We kind of went to their, you know, which I still help Brian Reedy quite a bit.
Yeah.
You know, I spot for him on race days and do his public relations and try to gain sponsors. And we kind of went to their off-season meeting, and we suggested, hey, do some kind of trackside parking for these folks. Get them closer to the action. So, but that's a little off topic.
That's perfectly fine.
Yeah,
because I don't know much about. I mean, Virginia racing. I'm from North Carolina, so when I did venture across the border, it wasn't very often. So I'm enjoying learning this stuff, because I remember I never got to go as a kid. Every time we tried to go to Motor Mile, it rained. Yeah. Like, I didn't go to an actual race there until last year with the Cars Tour, and I was working with Tony Stevens and Cars Tour TV. So when I finally saw it, I was like, my God, what a facility. Why is this not the Martinsville?
And it's a place that I think could easily host a Gander Truck Series or Xfinity Series race easily.
Oh, easily, yeah.
But, you know, I mean, it is what it is. We support them. I mean, Brian loves racing up there. The Reedy family, I mean, track champion there in 99. Track champion at Franklin County in 87. Yeah. So, you know, there'll always be a link between Franklin County and Motor Mile, because they're so close, and a lot of guys have raced both speedways in the last 20 years.
I think Whitey called it the short mile to kind of poke fun at Motor Mile.
Yeah,
he had his ways.
Yeah, he had his ways, and he, there's always been that rivalry, which, you know, I think it's like that in a lot of short track racing, which if these tracks would just get together and work together, I mean, it sounds easy. I know it's tough, but it can be done if the promoters would just do it. So.
Yeah. So to put a bow on everything, let's say that we leave out of this library and go down to the gas station and get a couple Powerball tickets. Say it's like 200-something million. Number's not important. And you hit. And you done set the money back for yourself, for your family, your kid, your extended family that's going to pop out of the woodworks. All that's taken care of, and you just have crazy amount of money to go buy Franklin County Speedway. What's some of the things you want to do?
I don't know if I've got enough time to let you know.
We might need another podcast.
I've always thought that Franklin County is centered, or it's not centered, but it's so close to being right in the middle of Motor Mile in South Boston, and you can throw Ace in there also, that if you could work with those tracks to run the same divisions and same rules, and pay a bonus program that if you ran both tracks or you finished in the top 5 in points at both tracks, you would get so much money at the end of the season. Or, you know, if you finished kind of like the bonus I did with the Rodney Cook thing, you know, where, you know, we were going to pay him $500 bonus if he came to our race and won, and if he went to Ace the next race and won, which he did, but I think he got disqualified for some spindle stuff. But you know, I mean, that's the kind of bonuses I think would help. I've always been a stickler for NASCAR sanctioning, which that probably is fading more each season.
Yeah.
But back in the 80s, I would really be intrigued to see if Franklin County would have been a NASCAR sanctioned track when the late model stock car division really got started.
Yeah.
And you could have, you know, Motor Mile, Franklin County, South Boston. Kind of like I would work it today if I had Franklin County.
Yeah. I
would do my best to do some kind of bonus program with those tracks. And it don't, you know, the late model stock car division's easy. It's the lower tier divisions that
are the issue.
Yeah, because the rules are different just about everywhere you go. So, yeah, I mean.
Here's the only thing I would ask you to do. bring the modifieds in.
Oh, yes.
Because when I watch the Southern Modifieds on YouTube from Franklin County, I'm like, God, I wish I'd have gone to one of those races.
Yeah, I mean,
those things sound amazing at Franklin
the
County.
Duluth years, the ASA Modifieds came, and you had Bert and Jason Myers. Ted Christopher had starts there. Ron Silk. I mean, big names in modified racing. In 2007 and 2008.
Yeah.
I mean, James Savali set the track record at a 12.86.
Ooh, man. That's flying.
And the person's record he broke, the late Richie Evans, that record had stood for like 30 years.
Wow.
So, I mean, modify. And, just going present day, with Ace announcing that they're going to run like the Bowman Gray style modifieds.
Yeah.
I think it would be perfect for Franklin County. Bring them up here, say Bowman Gray rules to the T. Bowman Gray tires. Those guys will come to Franklin County. I know David Hill would bring his 79 car every time he had a modified race because he loves. Jason Myers says it's his favorite racetrack to race a modified at. So
yeah, it's so daggum fast.
Yeah, I mean, it's just. People don't know. I mean, Franklin County Speedway has probably got a bad reputation among most racers that have never been there to race. But like I said earlier, if you talk to folks that have driven that racetrack, they'll tell you that how much fun it is.
Yeah.
And, if I had hit the lottery, I would change the front stretch to the back stretch.
Okay, so you'd flip it. Okay.
Because, and this, I mean, the sun is unbearable in that tower, on a race day.
Yeah, it is pretty bad.
Dig up all the concrete bleachers, bring in some aluminum bleachers from like all the way around. Kind of like, I like the way South Boston has their bleachers, You got the front stretch and maybe bring them around the side, and then all the back stretch do the trackside parking.
Yeah. I would pay for that.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
Stuff like that.
Raise the flag stand up off the wall.
Raise the flag stand. Go into infield, and at Franklin County, when you come off a track, you actually come uphill into the infield. Go in there and just level it, put new drainage in. I mean, if I had money, I could go on for days for the improvements. Yeah. I don't know if I would. I would not change the configuration, but the place does need paving. I mean, I'd hate to do it just because, those old racetracks have character and lots of grooves you can run.
But you can only patch the potholes so much.
Exactly. So,
well, brother, I appreciate it. We'll have to do another one of all the things to do with the unlimited amount of money. But thank you for doing this. I appreciate it. And make sure if you're on Facebook, go to the Franklin County Memories Facebook page. You're a fan of nostalgia. There's a ton of pictures and articles and stuff that get posted there about yourself and other people, and it's just cool to see. Even if you're not enamored with Franklin County, just to see that older style racing from a time when people like me, who was born in '88, ain't got a clue how good it was back in the '80s. But I appreciate you coming down, brother.
Hey, thanks, Tyler.